Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started on section 7.2, which is on personal budgeting. So as an overview, how much money did you spend last month? Did you answer exactly how much immediately? How long would it take for you to probably answer that question? It'd probably take you a while to answer that type of question, even to get a ballpark answer. You probably have to look over maybe like some of your credit card statements or debit card statements and things like that, and see really how much you spent that month to kind of keep track on it. Or you could be really, really on top of it, like always know how much you spend and things like that, which would be great. But for a lot of people, it'd probably take a little while, like add some stuff up and things like that, which probably means that we don't necessarily follow a strict budget. American consumers have a combined debt of $11 trillion. Learning how to budget your money is a good step to avoiding massive debt. So here we have a picture where we have this giant debt hole, and he's saying, someday, son, all of this will be yours. And a lot of things go into having debt, especially living in a country like America and whatnot. But here's some things that we can look at to kind of manage our own debt and personal budgeting. We can calculate monthly take-home pay. So budgeting is the process of deciding how much money you can spend on various expenses based on your income. Income is the amount of money that you earn. So your income is like your paycheck, essentially. Most people know how much they make as income. So you could say like, oh, I made this amount of money this month. But when you really add in things like deduction of taxes and insurance and retirement and bills, et cetera, the amount left over is called the take-home pay. So basically, after you've paid all of your bills, all of your taxes, everything like that, that is called take-home pay. It's important to know exactly how much money that you actually bring in home per month as a first step in budgeting. So if you make something like $5,000 a month and you're like, oh, cool, I made $5,000 a month. I could totally afford X, Y, and Z things. But then you really think about it and you've paid a lot of money for your taxes and bills and all this stuff. And really your take home pay might land you closer to like $2,500 or maybe even $2,000. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, I actually can't afford X, Y, and Z things that I wanted to do because I actually don't have that money. So it's good to know the difference between like income and take home pay. We have another little cartoon here. He's got a stand up and he's saying, you can keep the payroll. I just want the payroll deductions. So a lot of the time, a lot of money can be taken out of your income checks and everything like that from your job. Those are called payroll deductions. It can be a lot of money. So sometimes you say like, hey, I want the deductions, not the actual payroll itself. So just a little joke. So, on to our first example. We have Eddie works 25 hours a week at the bookstore and he gets a weekly paycheck for $195.30. What's his average monthly income? So, in this case, we're talking about average monthly income. So, like on average, how much does he make in a month? If we really think about it, some months have 30 days, and some months have 31 days, and some months have 28 days. And we could say that he's probably pretty reliable, about 25 hours a week, but like, what if that week got cut in half from the month? And there's a lot of variables that kind of go into it. So we think like, oh, weekly paycheck. Well, 4 weeks in a month, not always. There's not always 4 weeks in a month exactly. It's a little less, a little more, like things like that. So when we calculate things like average monthly income, we kind of want to go a different route about this. So thinking more along the lines of like, well, I know for a fact there's 52 weeks in a year. So I can say, what's my yearly income? 52 weeks in a year, I make $195.30 a week. So by the end of the year, I should make about $10,155.60. That should be my yearly income if I'm working every week for 25 hours and whatnot. So that's my yearly income. And I know for a fact there is 12 months in a year. So what I can do to find my average monthly or his average monthly income is instead take my yearly income and divide by 12 to find the average monthly income instead. And that's what we do. The monthly income is $10,155.60, which is the yearly income, divided by 12, because there's 12 months in a year. And the average monthly income should be $846.30. So there's a calculation that we can have. It's a little bit on the simpler side there. But then we kind of go in a different route, a different way about actually calculating that. All right. So calculating the amount spent on regular expenditures. As I'm sure you all know by now, minor expenses add up very quickly. We can categorize these expenses as luxury or necessary expenses. Did you buy clothes or food? Things like that. Some expenses are fixed, so the amount you spend each month is always the same. Maybe insurance payments, student loan payments, rent, things like that. Those are fixed, they're always the same. And some are more variable, so the amount changes month to month. Maybe your grocery bill was more expensive this month than last month, so things like that. The key to maintaining a sensible budget is to add up your necessary expenses and subtract them from your income. This results in the amount that you actually have to spend on entertainment, luxuries, and savings. So your take-home pay, kind of in addition to like taking out all the bills and your like typical fixed expenses, and even taking into consideration your variable expenses as well. That is how much you really have left over to spend on whatever you want. So, as an example, calculate the amount spent on each regular expenditure. So, for part A, let's say you buy Starbucks twice a day, every day for $5.25 a cup of whatever it is. How much would you actually spend in a year doing this? So, if you buy Starbucks twice a day, each cup is $5.25. So, we can see how much are you actually spending in a day. Daily, you're spending about $10.50 on Starbucks. Now we know there's 365 days in a year. We don't count leap years. So 365 days in a year, it's how much you're spending daily. So $10.50 times 365 comes out to about $3,832.50. That would be how much you're spending in a year on Starbucks. And you could look at that number and be like, that's totally worth it. And that's great. Sometimes it can put things a little bit into perspective when you start making coffee at home. Then we have part B. If you spend $8.79 for lunch at Burger King 3 times a week, how much would you spend during a 16-week semester? So kind of like if you're eating out a lot during the semester, how much money does that actually become? So $8.75, you're eating it 3 times a week and there's 16 weeks. So weekly, we're spending about $26.37 on Burger King. And then there's 16 weeks in the semester. So the semester would be $26.37 times 16 for 16 weeks. It comes out to $421.92. So that would be on how much you're spending for lunch for a 16-week semester, 3 times a week. And once again, maybe you look at that number and you're like, that's like about how much I spend on groceries, and I'd rather not put in like the time or effort to really make food. Then yeah, that would be totally worth it. So it's all kind of up to you. It's all whatever you decide your personal budgeting, fixes are how you like it. That's an example. So we'll do an example together. You say Tremaine brings home $3,146.79 a month, and he has the fixed expenses shown below. Rent is $1,200. A car payment is $199.23. Cell phone payment is $79.50. Gas is about $110. Insurance is $97.50. Utilities is $175. Student loan payments would be $211.53, and savings is $300. So how much can he afford to spend on food, clothing, and luxuries? So asking ourselves, like, how much is he actually going to spend on things like food, clothing, and anything else? So food isn't even in here, like a grocery budget isn't even put inside these fixed expenses, but we can decide how much he really has to spend for the rest of the month. All right, let's go ahead and do that together. All right, so we have our fixed expenses, and then we want to see how much can actually be spent on everything else. So we can just first identify a couple things. That's how much Tremaine brings home a month, so that is his income. Then we have all of these expenditures. So what we need to do to figure out how much money he actually has left over is to just subtract all of the fixed expenses from the income. So what we can do is we can add all of these numbers up. So we'll see how much total fixed expenses there are. So total fixed expenses. So starting off, 1,200 plus our next one, $199.23 plus $79.50 plus $110 plus $97.50 plus $175 plus $211.53 plus $300. So our total fixed expenses is the sum of all of those values. So definitely go into your calculators and add up all those numbers together. And the value you should end up getting is $2,372.76. So that's how much Tremaine is spending on the fixed expenses. So the question is, how much can he afford on basically everything else? We're going to need to subtract the total fixed expenses from the income that he makes. So we take the value of his income, $3,146.79, and we subtract the total fixed expenses, $2,372.76. This final value that he has is $774.03. That's how much Tremaine actually has to spend on things like food, clothing, and luxuries. Once you add in a grocery budget, that could definitely be cut in half. Maybe not, but definitely a good chunk of that will be taken out from food. And so there'll be a lot less left over for things like clothing and luxuries. So that's how much Tremaine would have left over. So, all right, let's go ahead and go on back over to our lecture. All right, so we finished this one up. Moving on, we can talk about prorating long-term expenses. So far we've only really talked about like monthly expenses, but some regular expenses occur on an annual or even semi-annual basis. Examples of this are things like car insurance, tuition payments, property taxes. So things like that can be kind of, semi-annually, even quarterly, or just annually, mean yearly. If you spend every penny you have each month, occasionally these large expenses can be really hard to pay off and usually result in mounting debt. So if you're spending all the money that you have every single month, and then you're expected to make this large expense every 6 months, that can get really hard to end up paying off. One way to avoid this is to try to budget in advance, so if something comes up, you have money waiting for you to actually spend. So it's always good to be aware of those like larger expenses that may be looming on the horizon, making sure that you have everything you need to be able to pay those off. Which leads us into our next example. We have Dharma and Greg have a combined monthly income of $5,280.94. They want to save ahead for semi-annual property taxes of $1,146, the semi-annual car insurance of $493.21, and semi-annual homeowners insurance of $893.20. What percentage of their income should be saved each month? So we're seeing these expenses that are semi-annually, meaning every 6 months. So they have a couple things to save up for every 6 months. So they need to know how much of their income should they be saving each month in order to save up for this. And we're looking for a percentage here as well. So we're going to do this all together. So let's go on over to our notes. All right. So here we have our question again. So we know that we're going to have a specific amount of things being due in the course of about 6 months. So let's look at that really quick. Semi-annual. Yes. Means 6 months. Then these are all fixed expenses over 6 months. So we can add those up. Once again, we have total fixed expenses. We have property taxes, 1,146, plus car insurance, $493.21, and homeowners insurance of $893.20. So our total fixed expenses is all of these things added up. So we go into our calculators, we add up those values. This should come out to $2,532.41. So this is the amount that they're going to owe every 6 months. So we want to know, how much am I really going to need to be putting aside every month to be able to afford this in 6 months? So the amount that we'll take out is the amount of income per month will be the total amount of fixed expenses, 2,532.41, divided by the number of months, 6 months. It's happening every 6 months, so if we kind of break it down into each month, we can make it more manageable kind of bits. So if we divide by 6, and we're always rounding to the nearest second decimal place, this would come out to $422.07. So if they want to save up so they have this amount when it's due, they would need to be saving $422.07 out of each of their monthly paychecks. So the final question was just how much is this in percent? What percentage of their income is saved? So we learned about the amount increase and amount decrease and percents like that in our last section. So we can find this percent by taking the amount decrease, $422.07, so much we're taking out of our income, and dividing by the original amount, their monthly income. So the percent saved from each month would be $422.07 divided by their monthly income, $5,280.94. We can calculate that. Let's go ahead and just round to one whole number percentage. So when we find this value, we should end up getting 0.08, which we turn into a percent by taking our decimal place and moving over 2 spots to the left. So this is 0.08. Move it 2 spots over, and this really becomes about 8%. So we would say about 8% of their income should be saved each month to be prepared enough to pay off those expenses every 6 months. So, all right, that finishes up our example. Let's go on back over to our lecture. All right, that was our example. And that wraps up section 7.2. So in summary, in section 7.2, we learned how to calculate a monthly take-home pay, calculate the amount spent on regular expenditures, prepare a budget, and prorate long-term expenses to save in advance. So, all right, that wrapped up section 7.2, and I'll go ahead and see you in the next one.